Okay, ouch. When I touched the side of my neck, Robert had just slapped. I couldn't help but wince in pain. As old memories resurfaced, I couldn't help but compare Robert, my sugar daddy, to the worst side of my parents. There was a time when my parents used to hit me whenever they'd get upset with each other. I was younger then, but now I was 17, and a man hitting me with such conviction did not bode well for my self-respect or confidence. "Look what you made me do." Robert rubbed his forehead and walked up and down his bedroom. He looked distraught, as if the very idea that I'd made him hit me was painful for him to deal with. Talk about foolishness. If I didn't fear angering him, I would have rolled my eyes. "This is why I keep telling you to listen to me," he continued and looked at me every so often. "All I needed, Nate, was a photo. How much time does it take for you to click a picture? You know you're getting paid for that, right? Or have you forgotten?" I knew it was a bad idea to meet him in person. Robert had proposed the idea of meeting face-to-face some weeks ago. He promised that if I did so, he would increase my payment and then he would send me more gifts. The very idea that I would be able to pawn off so many expensive items in exchange for money that I desperately needed was a thought that I couldn't remove from my mind. And even though I was aware of Robert's irritating habits and possessive natures and demands, I thought it couldn't get any worse than I'd seen over the months. I was wrong, obviously. "I was sick," I repeated. It was a lie. I wasn't sick. I was just sick of him and his demands. Until now, Robert had been fairly respectful of my boundaries. But today he proved that he was just like any other adult man I'd come across in my short life. If I had the muscles to beat him, I believe I might have done that. "Yeah, but a picture, Nate? How hard was that?" He sighed and sat down on his bed before asking me to sit by him. Still afraid of him, I sat a little away from him. When he noticed, his eyes hardened, but he still didn't say anything. "Have you eaten?" "No, not yet." "Then maybe Felix can help you with that." He got off the bed and started walking up and down the room again. "I'm sorry for the, slap. I promise I didn't mean to do that, but sometimes you make me upset, Nate. Let's work on that, alright?" I nodded, not really caring what he was saying. "Who's Felix?" "My son," he replied. "He's a couple years older than you, but he always acts like a hardened criminal. I swear to God, one of these days he's going to get himself killed." With what he was saying, I couldn't help but worry that I was going to meet someone just like Robert. At the same time, I wanted to get out of here and from Robert's side. If anything, I wanted to return home and think of 100 different ways to murder this man for what he had done. I could already feel it itching on the side of my neck, and knew that it would take a massive effort to hide it. "Let's go," he said and opened the door. "Okay," I replied and silently followed after Robert. Before we could walk down the stairs, however, he grabbed my arm. "Nate, do not tell him what you are to me, alright? He is too smart for his own good, keeps looking for ways to make things worse for no reason. You understand?" I nodded and verbally promised that I wouldn't tell him anything, but I knew in my heart that if the conversation came up, I would not shut up. I would let Robert's son know what was going on between us. I was sure that wouldn't mess up with my plans for my family. "I will send you some gifts, alright? They will be my apology. You know how bad I am with words, Nate. In fact, you can ask for anything you'd like. I will provide them for you. That's what I do best, right?" When he smiled down at me, I smiled back. It wasn't genuine, but I wanted to get away from him as soon as possible. I wanted to get over this day already. Felix wasn't in the hall when we came downstairs, so Robert called him and asked him if he can come down already. When I saw Felix, I stopped thinking. Yes, that's the best way to describe what I was feeling at that moment. There was a lull in my mind, and I knew that I developed a crush so immense that if Felix turned out to be a stupid, mean guy like his dad, it would absolutely break my little heart. He was gorgeous personified, and when he walked, it looked like he'd already accomplished things that I could only dream of. And what did Robert say? He was only a couple years older than me. Generational wealth, I muttered to myself, a little annoyed already. I knew it was all because of that. There was no way the son of a man as rich as Robert didn't receive help from his dad. "Felix, my son," Robert said in mock excitement and then pointed at me. "This is Nate, my student." "What student?" Felix asked, looking incredibly bored. "Uh-huh," I thought to myself. "From the college when I still used to teach, that is." He was a good liar, Robert the bastard he was. Robert slapped a hand over my shoulder and then smiled at Felix. "Look, Felix, can you fix him some food at your restaurant? I am busy and I need to be somewhere else urgently. I'll pay you." Felix looked at me, his expression now a lot more smooth. It was then I realized I hadn't said a single word to him. I blushed with shame and then waved at him. "I am Nate," I said. "Hello, Nate. On a scale of 1 to 10, how hard is it to deal with my dad?" This was the first time that gorgeous man had spoken to me, and he had already proved himself to be a funny man. If Robert didn't take offense easily, I really would have laughed. "Felix," Robert said, "please behave." He looked down at his watch and then told Felix that he needed to make sure I had something in me. Felix rolled his eyes and flipped him off, and then settled on one of the sofas. 5 minutes later, Robert left us alone. "You can sit. Just give me 5 minutes," Felix said. "Thank you." I did as was suggested. As Felix worked on his laptop, I couldn't help but sneak glances at him every so often. He was so very handsome, exactly like I expect Robert's son to be. A few weeks ago, Robert had shared a couple of his pictures when he was still young, and I had to agree that he looked handsome in his prime. And now his son was sitting right in front of me, looking as handsome as his dad had looked decades earlier. Felix must have felt eyes on him because when he looked at me with the raised eyebrow, I couldn't help but gasp out the first thought that came into my mind. I had done it to defend myself, but I knew I'd just make things embarrassing for myself. "You're handsome." Felix gave a small laugh, looking flustered. A few staff around us giggled in response, and I wondered if it was possible for me to melt myself on the sofa. "Thanks," Felix replied, still smiling and looking a lot more relaxed now. With my heart still in my throat, I asked if he was alright with the whole idea of bringing me to his restaurant. He replied that he didn't mind. Besides, in a way, I was glad. I didn't have a car on me, not yet. Sometime later. On our way to the restaurant, Felix asked what I was studying. I mean, I know my dad was a lit professor, but I have seen some real dorks ringing the doorbell for him. When I was naive and unaware of the truth, I felt proud of him. He left teaching a long time ago, and it made me so happy that he still continued doing what he's always been so passionate about. And then, he stopped and licked his bottom lip. There was a furrow between his brows, and I somehow knew whatever he was going to say wasn't going to be easy for me to accept either. And then, I found my dad's a fucking disgusting asshole. That was too many swear words packed into a single sentence. I knew what he meant all of a sudden. I knew what Robert was doing with the so-called dorks that knocked on his door. They were just like me. They were his sugar babies. I wondered if he was continuing with them. I wondered how they escaped it if they were no longer associated with Robert. I wondered how hard it would be for me. Luckily for me, it started raining. Felix got busy dealing with the sudden traffic and introducing his restaurant to me, and I didn't need to talk about the things that I was sure I didn't want to. But things changed. After I'd had my dinner, Felix asked how I was planning to head home. I told him that I would most likely book a cab, and he shook his head and claimed that it wouldn't be exactly safe. "If it's alright with you," he said, looking as if he genuinely hoped it was alright with me, "I can drop you off." "Aren't you busy?" I asked. "I am, but I have so many staff for a reason. I will return to the restaurant after dropping you off. No worries about that." For some reason, his little effort to make some schedule changes in his busy work life seemed incredibly heartwarming to me, and to say that we hadn't even known each other for a day. Suddenly, I couldn't help but wonder how nice being with him would be. Would he be as nice and caring as he appeared to be now? "Hello? Nate?" Felix said and waved a hand in front of me. I cleared my throat. "That's alright, thank you." He smiled and told me to wait 5 more minutes. Sometime later. I firmly believed it was Felix's kindness that made me speak out the truth. Not that I could blame him for it, but I needed some reason to come forth with the truth. And so I did. Before I knew it, I told him that I was his dad's sugar baby. For the next 10 minutes, there was absolute silence between us. I was hyperactive in those 10 minutes, scared that he'd either scream at me or hit me. When I couldn't hold it any longer, I started giving him the reasons I chose this particular lifestyle. My parents divorced a couple months ago, I began. And after a while, things got worse for my mom and me. She didn't have a stable job, and I stopped and corrected myself. I didn't have a job either. We desperately needed money to keep our house, so I found this website. Then I found your dad, and he promised he'd pay me, and he does. When he still didn't say anything, I added, "I'm not proud of this, Felix, but this is the only option I have." He was biting hard on his bottom lip, and I worried that he'd break the skin if he continued it anymore. "What does your mom do?" Felix asked finally. "She works in retail," I replied. "She doesn't earn much?" "Nothing that could help us," I confessed, a little ashamed to bear so much of myself in front of a total stranger. "By being with your dad, I can at least make sure we have food and a house. We are alright right now. There's little burden on us." "Your mom knows about it?" I shook my head. She would kill me if she found out. "I have told her I worked as a freelance writer." Felix scoffed and gave me a look. "Please don't tell me she believes that shit. No freelance writer earns so much." I blushed. "I cannot show her everything," I agreed. "So, I occasionally send some thousands in her bank account. I have to be careful about it." "Of course," Felix replied and asked if we were going in the right direction. I pointed at the GPS and told him that we were on the right road. "Look, Nate, you look like a very nice guy, so I'm telling you to stay away from my dad. He isn't a very bright man, and he sucks, alright? That's the gist of the entire advice. He sucks a big time. I don't live with him. I started the restaurant and now I live in an apartment on my own." "I don't have the money." "Okay," Felix said. "It's always difficult in the beginning." "You must have had Robert's help?" He gave me a small laugh. "Do you hate that? He is rich, and if he was ready to give me money, how could I have said no? But after the establishment, I haven't asked for a single penny from him." He stopped the car in front of my home. "Be safe, Nate." And that was the last I saw him in the coming days. A few days later. Of course, the little interaction between Felix and me was life-changing. Ever since that particular night, I hadn't thought of anything but him. It didn't matter if it happened during the school hours or when I was busy going through my homework and my hefty preparations for upcoming exams. I always thought of Felix. In turn, obviously, that meant I often thought about Robert too. And whenever I thought about both of them at the same time, I compared them. It happened unwittingly, but it did happen. I compared their looks, their mannerisms, the way they talked, the way they laughed, or talked or interacted with people. Because of all these thoughts, I often overlooked the importance of my own studies. Not my proudest moment for sure, but it was far too engaging to not delve into them a lot. Then, just as I wondered if it was a good idea to ask Robert about Felix, I met him near his restaurant. It was a few days after our first meeting, and totally not planned. When Felix asked, I told him it was a mere coincidence. To make it sound believable, I even gave a small but awkward laugh. "I didn't think I'd see you at this hour," I added. It was around the same time Felix and I had come to his restaurant days earlier, so the very fact I said that sounded like a fat lie. I was glad he didn't call out the bluff, even though it was obvious he had caught on to it. But if the man liked my attention, who was I to be scared of him? "Have you eaten, or?" Felix asked. "Nope, just returned from meeting with a friend." I was lying. Oh, God, I was lying so much to him. I just returned from Robert's place. He'd asked me to meet him really urgently. When I met him, he said all he wanted to do was kiss me. And he did that and more. "Alright, I haven't eaten anything either." Can we have dinner together? I asked, my eyes sparkling a little. Yes, we can. Felix gave me a small smile. When it was said and done, I asked for his number. It was a bold move, and I was pretty sure he was going to get the hint that I was interested in him, although he gave me his number without a word. I couldn't help but wonder if he was thinking that I was trying to rope both the rich father and son. It was a humiliating thought, but over the next few weeks that Felix and I interacted, he didn't so much as make me feel any such things. Instead of all of that, he was incredibly kind and touchy. Felix was a touchy kind of guy. Whenever he laughed, he touched the person closest to him. Whenever he shared a concern or two with me about either his restaurant or his dad, he clutched my hand in his. The touch, no matter what the occasion, was always tender. And a guy as helpless as me was bound to get attached to that. Sometime later. You're always on your phone these days, Robert said and looked at me through his wide-rimmed glasses. I immediately closed the messenger and sat up straighter. Over the past few weeks, Felix and I had been messaging each other nonstop. We rarely met outside his restaurant hours and my school hours, but whatever time we did spend together was always spent in a state of bliss. What was even better was that he was almost always readily present whenever I messaged him. I give you attention whenever you demand that of me, I replied, sounding a little more than annoyed now. And you're becoming snarky, he commented, dropping his glasses. What are you going to do? Hit me? I wasn't sure where all this sudden hatred was coming from, but in recent times I had grown weary of him in his presence. He still sent me money and expensive gifts, but I couldn't really find the joy I used to find in them. I knew and understood their monetary value, but that was what Robert had become in my life. Every interaction of his was transactional. It was one time, Nate. Not one time, I replied, angry tears spilling down my cheeks. You've hurt me thrice in this last week alone. I gathered my stuff from the bed and got off it when I saw him shifting and moving on the bed. I was having a good day, and I didn't want him to ruin it for me. You know what, Robert? I think I'll go home. I am tired. You cannot show me this attitude. I pay you. I don't want to get paid anymore, I shouted. Robert looked stunned, as if he hadn't ever considered that possibility. I will inform your mom about this, he warned. I huffed then. Do you know what you're saying, Robert? You're 48. I'm 17. There's no way you aren't going to jail if anybody finds out. We know each other since I was 16. This seemed to scare him, and he sat down with a small huff. And I was messaging my classmates. We are working on a group project, and I was discussing it with them. It was a lie. I was texting Felix, and he had asked me if I wanted to hang out with him again. The offer had excited me, and that was why I was smiling. The thing that bothered Robert the most about me was probably my smiles. He liked it better when it was directed at him. That's what's keeping me busy. Stop being so jealous. I am not your boyfriend. Where are you going? I am going home, I replied. How will you go home? Robert asked. I will book a cab or something, I answered and messaged Felix if I could see him at his restaurant. He replied that there weren't many customers at the shop and that he would love to see me. Bye, Robert. Bye, Nate. Sometime later. I am thinking of finding some jobs, I said. Felix hummed and rolled the cloth to the other side to clean the table. It was late, and there was only one customer at the restaurant. And what are your areas of interest? Writing, I answered. Teaching, honestly. I like teaching. A habit my dad and you share. Interesting. Ew, don't say that, I replied. Felix gave a small laugh. Sorry, do you hate him? Not hate him, but I'd rather not get compared to him like that. Alright, apologies. I will not commit this gross act again. So, you said writing and teaching. I'm sure some qualifications would help. I knew what the conversation was steering at, so I tried to change the topic. But they'll take time, and I do not think they'll pay me as good as your dad. A furrow settled on his eyebrows. Nothing will pay as good as my dad does, Nate, but that doesn't mean that you should not try. He sighed and settled on the seat opposite to me. My dad has a lot of money to spare, and he does that in the easiest way that comes to him. If you decide to rely on him for every need, it will make your life a living hell. It's better you focus on yourself. Growth is very important. How old are you anyway? I am sure the right institutions will help with that. I wasn't sure how he would react to my age, so I changed the subject again. Have you eaten? Oh, have I offended you? No, I'm just hungry, I replied with a small smile. Then we have something special today. I would love to taste that, I replied. Sometime later. I can see you hate walking, Felix commented and pointed at my droopy shoulders. Stand straighter, you'll hurt your back. I think I am sleepy. I can share that feeling, honestly. He pushed his hands in his pockets and looked at me. Despite the vague age difference between us, he was almost the same height as me. No wonder my height probably deceived him about my age, and I wasn't sure why I was deceiving him at all. It wasn't like he wanted to take an advantage of me being so young. What? I asked, laughing a little. Do you want to work at my restaurant? Felix asked, sounding nervous for the first time. I am the owner, so of course I would only say nice things about it. But I think the pay is good, even for the beginner. I can send you the email, if you'd like. The working hours can be adjusted. You have to work 7 hours a day at whatever time that works best for you. You prefer working from 10? Can be done. You prefer 11? Can be done. That sounds nice, I replied, a little flattered. It is nice, and we can meet. The proposal sounded so good that I couldn't help but stop my tracks to stare at him. He stopped in his tracks as well and looked back at me. And as the cliche went, we leaned into the kiss at the same time. I thought the night would end on that note, but I wasn't so lucky. When he dropped a hand on my nape to pull me closer, I winced in pain. Several days ago, right after the weeks-old mark had healed, Robert had pinched the skin there and hadn't stopped until he broke the skin. The bruise was still there and still fresh. Felix, hearing my pain gasp, immediately pulled back and looked at me in horror. Nate, are you alright? No, just... I stopped and rubbed my finger over the tender skin. It hurts a little. How did that happen? I fell onto something. I lied, but it was of no use. I know that didn't happen, Nate. And, well, I was forced to tell him what really happened. A few days later, I started hating Robert. I knew I hated him long before I met Felix, but now I hated him more. I was pretty sure I hated him so much, I wanted to see him away from me. I didn't want to talk to him or meet him or even see him. And that was how and why I stopped replying to his messages soon after the kiss Felix and I shared. In return, Robert promised that he wouldn't send me a single penny until I talked to him. I told him that I didn't want to talk to him. And then he started sending threatening messages. He even promised that he'd sell my pictures to anyone who wanted to buy them. Afraid and scared for myself because I was well aware that my face was visible in a lot of those photos, I decided to meet him. Thankfully, I had the mind to inform Felix about it. When I met Robert, the first thing he asked was, "Have I done something to hurt you, Nate?" And the question sounded so innocent, no one would have guessed that he was an abusive man. Are you seriously asking me that? I couldn't help but scoff. I am, he replied, because I do not understand why you're acting the way you are. I give you money, and you do this to me. You hit me, I replied, upset now. Because you make me do that. God, how stupid this man was. You know what? I'm just here to tell you that please don't sell those photos. And I want to end this arrangement between us. I do not want to do this anymore. Why? Have you found a job? I have, I replied. Yesterday was my first day at Felix's restaurant. It was both chaotic and amazing. I liked working in the environment, and I was pretty sure I was going to love it more as the time passed. Oh, trying to be an independent person now, are we? I am done with you." Before I can move away, he grabbed my hand and again raised his own to hit me. But before he could do any of that, Felix came in between us and stopped him. "Dad," he said, "please stop." When we walked out of Robert's place, Felix asked if I wanted to inform the cops. I replied that I wasn't sure. It was too big a step, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for my mom to find out what I had been doing over the past few months. But when Robert didn't stop messaging me and asking me if I wanted to meet him again, I thought, well, how bad could it be? A few days later, I handed my phone to Felix and he went through the text. And then I knew how bad it could get. "You're 17? Felix asked, shocked and surprise colored his face. "I'm sorry." "Jesus, Nate." He dropped the phone on the bed and slapped a broad hand over his face. "Why didn't you tell me? We have kissed so many times." "I thought it didn't matter." "It does matter, Nate. Jesus." He rubbed his forehead and avoided looking at me. "I'm 20, Nate. Do you know how wrong that is?" "Your dad's case is worse," I replied, a little upset. I knew I was at fault, but I didn't want to lose Felix over it. "I'm not going to tell anyone we kissed, I promise, Felix. And I wanted to kiss you. You did not force me to do anything." "Did my dad force you?" he asked, worried now. "Sometimes," I replied. "I have mentioned that in the chat twice." He swallowed. "You know, I have always hated my dad," Felix began. "But to think this is how he'd end up in jail, that's a solid whiplash. Nate, if you're ready, I think we can get you out." Felix's way of saving me was to inform the cops of the situation. A few days later, my mom was furious, and my dad blamed it all on her. Obviously, that meant that the situation at home was bad. I knew better than to go home and make it worse, so after Felix's suggestion, I decided to spend the next few days at his place. He was still upset at me for hiding my age from him, but he talked, or sometimes I made him talk. "You didn't come to the restaurant today," he said. "I called in sick," I replied and peeked at him over my comforters. "It was a lie, I know." "You accepted it," I shrugged. Felix smiled and walked into the room. "I brought us some food." "You're very kind, Felix, but I'm not hungry." "You messaged me that you're hungry." There was a question in his tone now. "And it was only 15 minutes ago." "Did I now?" "We can hang out after this," Felix promised. "Can we watch all the Insidious movies?" Felix looked at me in disbelief. "Horror? Isn't horror good?" I asked. I sat up on the bed, curious to hear his answer. I knew he wasn't a horror fan, but honestly, that was how I knew fun would happen. We are so watching the movies then. And so we did. A few days later. "Here, coffee for you," Felix said and slid one coffee cup in my direction. "If anyone asks, you bought it yourself, capiche?" I grabbed the warm cup of coffee and felt relaxed already. "Thanks." "A tough day at work, is it?" "Honestly, it is," I agreed. "How's your school going?" he asked and then cleared his throat. I furrowed my eyebrows. "It's going well, honestly." My voice dimmed the further I found him. At some point, I noticed his hand on the desk, very close to my own. Ever since that day he found out about my age, Felix had kept his distance. I could see him just as curious as I was, but he never crossed the boundary he had set for himself. Now I could see his hand trembling over the desk. "What about your college?" "Your dad left me a lot of money," I replied, and then shrugged with a small laugh. "Since Mom already knows about it, I don't think I have to hide it anymore. I'm going to use it for college then." "That's a good idea," he replied with a small smile. "I got an update from the station. Dad's in serious trouble." "I'm sorry." "You don't have to feel sorry for him. Or me. It's alright. This had to happen someday, and now it has happened." He shrugged and leaned against the desk. "I think I should return to my desk." I gave him a smile. I think you should. Before he could leave, I asked if he wanted to hold my hand. No kiss? I asked, a little curious to know what he'd answer. For now, no, I'll pass. And honestly, I was okay with that. I waved at him and watched him return to his desk. Conclusion. Robert is going behind bars for a long time. Felix had, among other things, helped me charge him with grooming. Not only did he have pictures of a minor, the minor being me, but he threatened to release them without my permission, had an intimate relationship with a minor, and actively pursued several other teenagers like me. Felix and I are still living together. My mom has forgiven me, but she insists I live away from her. I still have the money that Robert left me, so I have not run into any financial trouble. Plus, the money that I now have for my job at a restaurant helps me deal with my college tuition. For Felix and I, well, he still insists he doesn't want to start anything between us for some time, and I am alright with it. Maybe I can use this break to deal with my past and to understand him. The end. What do you think of the sugar daddy, sugar baby relationship setting? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our rainbow force and to stay wholesome.